The warlords of the Zorvith Dominion had never known fear. For 300 years, their rule had gone unchallenged. The Dominion's armies had conquered thousands of worlds, enslaving entire species, wiping out those who resisted, and turning planets into resource hubs to fuel their never-ending wars. Their technology was unmatched, their battle fleets the most feared in the galaxy. Every species that had dared to stand against them had been crushed, their civilizations reduced to footnotes in history. The Zorvith did not believe in mercy. When they set their sights on Earth, they didn't even consider it a true war. Humanity was primitive in their eyes, backward creatures wielding projectile weapons in an era of plasma cannons, orbital bombardments, and energy-based warfare. They saw Earth's armies as little more than a minor nuisance, a species playing at war while the true warriors of the galaxy reigned supreme. High Warlord Dreskar, supreme commander of the Dominion's expansion fleets, stood at the balcony of his towering fortress on the planet Torvax. Below him, the capital city of Velzora buzzed with life. Hundreds of thousands of Zorvith soldiers patrolled the streets, their towering, muscular forms adorned with heavy armor and advanced weaponry. Massive war machines rolled through the avenues, and sleek, hovering gunships streaked overhead. The planet was an impenetrable fortress, a symbol of Dominion power. And tonight, they would celebrate their latest victory. Dreskar turned to the assembled warlords behind him. 7 of them stood in a semicircle, each draped in the crimson and black banners of the Dominion, each one responsible for the conquest of entire sectors of space. They were titans among their kind, battle-hardened generals who had led campaigns of destruction for centuries. The fortress's grand hall, an enormous chamber lined with banners from conquered worlds, was filled with officers, soldiers, and Dominion elites. A massive holoscreen displayed footage of Earth's burning cities, New York, Tokyo, London, all reduced to smoldering rubble beneath the Dominion's orbital assault. Captured human soldiers were paraded through the streets like trophies, their weapons displayed as relics of a dead age. Dreskar reached down and lifted one such weapon from its stand. A human sniper rifle, an M2010 enhanced sniper rifle, to be precise. He turned it over in his clawed hands, inspecting the long barrel, the scope, the bolt-action mechanism. A crude, ancient design compared to Dominion technology. With a laugh, he held it up for all to see. "This," he said, his deep, guttural voice booming through the hall, "is what the humans thought could defeat us." The other warlords chuckled. Some outright roared with laughter. Dreskar continued, grinning. "While we harness the power of plasma, while our soldiers are clad in impenetrable armor and our fleets wield weapons that can reduce planets to ash, this is what they bring to battle." He shook his head. A projectile weapon? A tool of a lesser species. A warlord to his left, Zalvok, sneered. "They still use kinetic force to kill? How utterly primitive." "Not just primitive," another added. "Obsolete." Dreskar smirked and tossed the sniper rifle to the floor, where it clattered uselessly. "And yet they call themselves warriors." The hall erupted in laughter once more. As the warlords drank, feasted, and boasted of their victory, the city of Velzora remained in full celebration. Hundreds of thousands of soldiers flooded the streets, indulging in the spoils of war. Music blared from alien instruments, Dominion banners flew high, and captured human weapons were displayed like ancient artifacts. Above the city, Dominion warships hovered like silent gods, their presence a reminder of who ruled this world. Victory was absolute. Or so they thought. 5 miles away, hidden in the ruins of a shattered skyscraper, Sergeant Cole Reynolds watched through his scope. His heartbeat was steady. His breathing was slow and controlled. Every muscle in his body remained still. He had been here for over 12 hours, unmoving, waiting. The warlords thought their victory was secure. They believed humanity was broken, its warriors crushed beneath their superior might. They had no idea that death was already watching them. Reynolds adjusted his aim. His rifle, a heavily modified .50 caliber sniper rifle, was a relic of human warfare, yes, but it was far from obsolete. The Zorvith had underestimated it, just as they had underestimated him. Their arrogance would be their downfall. His crosshairs hovered over the grand balcony, where the warlords stood in their triumph. Then, he focused on his target, High Warlord Dreskar. The alien leader laughed, basking in his supposed victory, still speaking of humanity as if it were nothing. Reynolds exhaled slowly. His finger tightened on the trigger. Crack! The shot echoed through the city like a thunderclap. Dreskar's head snapped backward. For a brief second, nothing happened, then the top half of his skull detonated, spraying gore across the balcony. His massive body collapsed, blood pooling around him. Silence. For the first time in their history, The warlords of the Dominion were speechless. Then chaos erupted. The crowd below panicked. Soldiers shouted orders. Plasma rifles were raised. Drones were deployed. The entire fortress went into lockdown. The warlords scrambled for cover, their once confident expressions now twisted in terror. Reynolds chambered another round, calm as ever. He adjusted his aim. Another warlord turned to bark orders. Crack! The bullet punched through his throat, severing his spine instantly. The mighty Zorvith Dominion had ruled with absolute power for centuries. And yet, in the span of 3 seconds, 2 of their greatest warlords lay dead. Reynolds smirked. Let's see if gods bleed. The hunt had begun. The sound of the gunshot still echoed through the city. For the first time in Zorvith history, their warlords had been caught off guard. High Warlord Dreskar, supreme leader of the Dominion's expansion fleets, lay crumpled on the balcony of his fortress. A steaming hole had replaced the upper half of his skull. His once proud, towering body was now a twitching mass of blood and grey matter. The other warlords, the most powerful beings in the Dominion, stood frozen in horror. A second ago, they had been laughing, mocking the primitive weapons of humanity. Now, their leader was dead, executed in front of their eyes. The sniper was here. Somewhere. Watching. The realization sent a pulse of fear through the gathered officers and warlords. For the first time in their brutal existence, they were being hunted. Then, another gunshot. Crack. The warlord standing closest to Dreskar barely had time to react. One moment, he was turning to bark orders. The next, his head snapped sideways, a jagged exit wound exploding out the back of his skull. His body collapsed before his brain even realized it had been destroyed. Panic exploded through the fortress. Sniper, a Zorvith officer roared. Soldiers scrambled, diving for cover. Some fired wildly into the distance, but they had no idea where the shots were coming from. Plasma rounds lit up the night sky, scorching the buildings beyond the fortress walls, but it was pointless. Sergeant Cole Reynolds had already repositioned. Miles away, deep in the ruins of Velzora, Reynolds adjusted his rifle and smirked. They still didn't know where he was. He had expected chaos, but this? This was better. The mighty Zorvith Dominion, the galaxy's most ruthless conquerors, were scared. Their mighty warlords were ducking behind cover like frightened recruits, terrified of a single unseen warrior. They had called human weapons primitive. Now, they were dying to them. Reynolds exhaled, recalibrating his scope. His rifle, a custom-built .50 caliber antimaterial weapon, was designed for long-range destruction. Every round he fired could punch through reinforced armor, shred vehicle plating, and, most importantly, obliterate warlords from over a mile away. And he had plenty of rounds. Through his scope, he scanned the fortress balcony. The warlords were cowering, their eyes darting across the ruined city, searching for a threat they would never see coming. Perfect. Reynolds took another breath, lined up his next shot. Crack. Another warlord fell. This time, the shot hit him in the chest, shattering his reinforced armor like it was made of paper. He staggered back, gasping, before collapsing in a heap of his own blood. 3 warlords dead. Velzora was in complete chaos. Inside the fortress, Warlord Zalvok bared his fangs, rage replacing fear. This is impossible, he roared, slamming a fist into the stone floor. The Zorvith were apex hunters. They had conquered jungle worlds where predators could smell a soldier's fear from miles away. They had slaughtered species that could bend light itself to become invisible. And yet, here they were, completely powerless against a single human. Zalvok turned to the officers. Deploy every drone, every thermal scanner, every sensor. Find him. The command center erupted into action. War machines roared to life, scanning technology was activated, and elite hunter squads were dispatched into the city ruins. They believed they were about to turn the tide. They were wrong. Reynolds had already moved. The moment he fired his last shot, he broke position, swiftly maneuvering through the bombed-out buildings of Velzora. He had memorized every alley, every abandoned structure, every possible escape route. As the Zorvith forces scrambled, he was already setting up his next ambush. He found his new nest inside a collapsed tower, giving him another clear vantage point of the fortress. Reynolds chuckled to himself. The Zorvith were treating this like a battlefield engagement. That was their first mistake. This wasn't a battle. This was a hunt. He chambered another round and set his sights on a Zorvith officer barking orders from the main courtyard. Crack. The officer dropped, his body convulsing before going still. Reynolds smirked. That should stir things up. It did. The Zorvith lost whatever composure they had left. Within the fortress, Zalvok was losing his mind. One by one, his officers were dying. The fortress garrison, once an invincible force, was collapsing into blind panic. And still, they couldn't find the sniper. Zalvok bared his fangs, turning to his second-in-command. Prepare the shock troops. I want every street patrolled. Send in the war hunters. The war hunters were the Dominion's most elite killers, silent, disciplined, and ruthless. Zalvok was convinced they would succeed where the others had failed. He was wrong. Reynolds spotted the war hunters immediately. They moved through the city like shadows, their cloaked figures scanning the ruins for any sign of their prey. They were smart, using drones, heat sensors, and soundwave detectors. Reynolds took that as a challenge. Crack. The lead hunter dropped before he even realized he'd been targeted. His body crumpled, blood pooling beneath him. His squad froze, their advanced sensors going wild. Reynolds let them panic. Then, he fired again. Crack. Another hunter fell. The rest scattered, their discipline breaking. Now, it was a game of cat and mouse. Inside the fortress, Zalvok received another report. The war hunters were gone. The sniper had eliminated them all. That was the breaking point. The Zorvith, for all their arrogance, had never faced an enemy like this. They were used to brute force, overwhelming power. They didn't know how to fight an enemy they couldn't see. Zalvok clenched his fists. His warlords were dead. His hunters were gone. His fortress was under siege, by one man. He had one last move. He stepped out onto the balcony, raising his voice for the entire city to hear. Human, he bellowed. You have taken much from us, but you are still just one man. If you are truly a warrior, you will face me. Silence. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, crack. Zalvok's chest exploded. The mighty warlord collapsed, his heart obliterated by a .50 caliber round. The last thing he saw was the sky above Velzora, and the banners of his people, soaked in his own blood. Reynolds watched through his scope as the last warlord died. The Dominion had laughed at human rifles. They weren't laughing anymore. And this was just the beginning. The hunt wasn't over. The death of Warlord Zalvok sent a shockwave through the Zorvith Dominion. He had been the last of the warlords stationed in Velzora. The last leader standing. And now, he lay crumpled on the balcony, a smoking hole in his chest. The moment his body hit the ground, the fortress fell into complete disarray. Officers screamed for order. Soldiers panicked, their discipline shattered. The mighty Zorvith army, once an unstoppable force, had been reduced to frightened animals. And still, the sniper was out there. Still watching. Still hunting. From his new position, Sergeant Cole Reynolds observed the aftermath through his scope. He had been patient. Precise. Every shot had been deliberate. He had shattered the Zorvith's confidence, turned their greatest stronghold into a den of fear. But his job wasn't done. No. Not yet. Velzora still stood. The fortress was still intact. The Dominion still held this world. And that was about to change. Reynolds exhaled slowly, his finger resting on the trigger. He could see the panic spreading through the Zorvith lines. Now, it was time to finish this. Inside the fortress, Zorvith officers scrambled to regain control. The high command room was in chaos. Holograms flickered, alarms blared, and transmissions overlapped in a cacophony of desperation. He's taken out the warlords. We don't know where he is. He could be anywhere. The fleet must be informed. We need immediate. Boom. The entire fortress shook. Dust rained from the ceilings. Consoles sparked. Officers stumbled, their eyes going wide. A second explosion followed, this time from the lower levels. What the? Boom. The fortress gates collapsed. The main entrance, once an impenetrable wall of reinforced durasteel, had been turned into a smoldering ruin. Zorvith soldiers stood frozen. They had no idea what had caused the blast. Then, over the comms, a terrified voice crackled through. Human reinforcements have landed. A chill ran through every Zorvith officer in the room. For centuries, the Dominion had fought wars against lesser species. They had never lost. Until now. And now, the humans weren't just hunting them from a distance. They were coming for them. Outside the fortress, drop pods slammed into the streets of Velzora. They came down like meteors, kicking up dust and fire. The hissing of superheated metal filled the air. Then, one by one, the pods opened. Out stepped the deadliest warriors humanity had to offer. Special forces. Snipers. Rangers. Green Berets. SEALs. Tier 1 operators. These weren't just soldiers. These were hunters. Every single one of them had been handpicked for this mission. Every single one of them was armed with weapons the Dominion had mocked. Now, those same weapons were about to tear the Zorvith to shreds. Reynolds smirked as he watched through his scope. They had arrived. And now? Now, it was time to finish the hunt. The first wave of human forces moved like ghosts through the burning ruins. They didn't charge recklessly. They didn't fight with brute force. They hunted. Zorvith patrols were silently eliminated, knives sliding through throats, suppressed rifles whispering death. The Dominion forces didn't even realize they were under attack until it was too late. One squad of Zorvith enforcers moved cautiously through the rubble, scanning for any sign of the enemy. Their thermal scanners were on, their weapons ready. They never saw the attack coming. A knife flashed in the darkness. The lead soldier collapsed before he could make a sound. His squad turned, but... crack! A sniper round took the next soldier's head off. The last two Zorvith warriors turned to flee. They never got the chance. One was ripped apart by a burst of gunfire. The other was tackled from behind, a combat knife driving deep into his spine. Within seconds, the entire squad was gone. And this scene was repeating itself all across the city. The hunters had arrived. The Zorvith were the prey. Inside the fortress, the remaining Dominion forces were in full-blown panic. Zorvith officers shouted over one another. Some demanded a counterattack. Others urged a full retreat. Then, another voice broke through the comms. "Command, this is Outpost Delta. We're under heavy attack. Human forces are static." The feed cut out. Then another voice. "Command, this is Bravo Squad. We're surrounded." There. Silence. One by one, Zorvith outposts went dark. One by one, their defenses collapsed. The mighty Zorvith Dominion, once feared across the galaxy, was falling apart. And there was nothing they could do to stop it. Reynolds watched it all unfold with satisfaction. From his vantage point, he could see the fortress struggling to hold its ground. It wouldn't last. Human forces were already breaching the outer walls. Explosions rocked the defensive lines. Gunfire echoed through the once proud capital of Velzora. Reynolds took a deep breath. He had started this fight alone. But now, he wasn't alone anymore. He spotted a group of Zorvith officers attempting to flee the battlefield. Not on his watch. Crack. One fell. Crack. Another. By the time the third tried to escape, it was already too late. Reynolds chambered another round and grinned. This was only the beginning. The mighty fortress of Velzora was burning. What had once been the impenetrable heart of the Zorvith Dominion now lay in ruins. Smoke rose into the alien sky, painting it black with the dying embers of war. Explosions rocked the city as human forces advanced, their methodical precision cutting through the last Zorvith defenses like a scalpel. The mighty Zorvith warriors, once conquerors of 100 worlds, were now prey. And Cole Reynolds was still hunting. The killing fields. Reynolds crouched in the remains of a collapsed building, his sniper rifle balanced on a broken wall. He scanned the battlefield through his scope, tracking the desperate movements of the remaining Zorvith forces. The once organized enemy had crumbled into scattered remnants. Officers barked frantic orders, squads moved erratically, and the last survivors of the Dominion's elite forces were attempting a desperate last stand. It wouldn't matter. Reynolds chambered a round, took a slow breath, and squeezed the trigger. Crack. A Zorvith commander, easily identified by his red battle plate, jerked backward, a fist-sized hole appearing in his chest. He collapsed, gurgling, his command baton falling from his limp claws. The soldiers around him froze. Then, they broke. The moment their leader fell, they lost what little courage they had left. Some fled toward the fortress. Others scattered into the ruins. A few brave ones attempted to fire wildly in the direction of Reynolds' last known position. It didn't matter. Reynolds was already gone. Inside the fortress. Deep within the fortress, the last of the Zorvith High Command huddled inside a reinforced war chamber. Massive holographic maps flickered before them, displaying a battlefield they were losing. High Commander Vraksha bared his fangs, his forearms clenching into fists. "This is unacceptable," he roared, his voice echoing through the chamber. "We are the Zorvith Dominion. We have crushed entire civilizations under our boots. How can this filthy human infestation be doing this to us?" The other officers remained silent. They had no answer. For the first time in their species' history, they were losing. And it was because of one man. One sniper. One human. One relentless, unstoppable specter of death. Vraksha turned to his remaining warlords, his yellow eyes burning with fury. If we are to die this night, he growled, then we will make these humans pay in blood. His clawed hand slammed down on the console, activating the final directive. The last Zorvath war engines roared to life. The monsters of war. Across the battlefield, something changed. The human strike teams, who had been methodically eliminating scattered Zorvath forces, suddenly found themselves facing something new. Massive, hulking war machines lurched to life. The Zorvath colossi, towering biomechanical horrors, stomped forward, their massive weapons charging with plasma energy. These things were not soldiers, they were living war beasts, each standing over 20 feet tall, their armor thick enough to shrug off small arms fire. And they weren't alone. The Dread Guard, the last of the Zorvath's genetically enhanced warriors, marched beside the war machines. Standing nearly 8 feet tall, with razor-sharp claws and enhanced reflexes, they were bred for a single purpose, killing. For the first time, the human strike teams found themselves pushed back. The Zorvath had finally stopped running. Now, they were fighting to the death. Reynolds' next hunt. From his vantage point, Reynolds adjusted his scope, watching as the battle shifted. The arrival of the war engines and Dreadguard had slowed the human advance. The massive colossi were turning the ruins into death zones, their plasma cannons reducing entire buildings to rubble. The Zorvath weren't giving up. Reynolds smirked. Good. He chambered another round and took aim. Through his scope, he spotted one of the colossi lumbering through the ruins. The massive war machine's central pilot compartment was protected by thick armor, but Reynolds knew there had to be a weak spot. He studied it. Calculated. Adjusted. Then. Crack. The shot slammed into the Colossus's head casing, right where two armor plates overlapped. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, boom. The war machine staggered as a secondary explosion erupted from within. It let out a mechanical screech, sparks and fire bursting from its joints before it collapsed, crushing several Zorvath warriors beneath its bulk. Reynolds smirked. One down. He shifted his aim. Found another target. Crack. Another headshot. Another Colossus down. Even these towering war machines were not immune to a well-placed .50 caliber round. And Reynolds had plenty of rounds left. The final assault. With the war engines failing, the Zorvath resorted to desperation. The last of the Dreadguard launched an all-out charge, their bodies enhanced with combat stimulants. They roared as they sprinted through the ruins, closing the distance fast, their razor-sharp claws gleaming under the firelit sky. But they weren't fighting civilians. They were fighting America's finest. The moment the Dreadguard entered close quarters, the SEALs and Green Berets unleashed hell. Shotguns blasted through enhanced flesh. Blades met claws in brutal melee combat. Explosives tore apart charging warriors before they could reach their targets. Reynolds watched from above, picking off key threats. A Dreadguard leapt toward a SEAL team. Crack. A round shattered his skull midair. Another charged a wounded soldier. Crack. His body jerked before collapsing in the dirt. One by one, the Dreadguard fell. One by one, the Zorvath's last warriors died. Until, finally, it was over. The battlefield fell silent. Velzora, once the unbreakable stronghold of the Zorvath Dominion, now lay in ruins. And standing over the fallen fortress were humans. The aftermath. Reynolds stood atop a broken wall, overlooking the battlefield. The fire still burned. The bodies still smoldered. The war was won. The Dominion had laughed at human rifles. They had mocked Earth's warriors. And now? They were dead. One man had started this war. One man had taken the first shot. And now? Now, the entire galaxy would remember his name. Cole Reynolds. The sniper who shattered an empire. The war was over, but the hunt wasn't. Velzora lay in ruins, its towering walls reduced to rubble, its once proud Zorvath banners now burning in the night wind. The air stank of charred flesh and plasma burns, and the once mighty Zorvath Dominion was nothing more than ash beneath human boots. And yet, one last enemy still breathed. One final warlord remained. And Cole Reynolds was going to finish this. The last warlord. Deep beneath the wreckage, far below the crumbling remains of his fortress, High Commander Vraksha limped through the darkness. His body ached, his once imposing battle armor now dented and scorched. The sounds of distant gunfire and dying screams echoed through the tunnels, but he barely noticed. All that mattered was escaping. He clutched his side, where a plasma burn from an earlier battle sizzled against his flesh. His four-clawed hands trembled as he stumbled forward, his mind racing. He had led armies that conquered entire star systems. He had crushed civilizations beneath his boots. And yet, his empire had fallen in a single night. All because of the humans. He gritted his fangs, rage boiling inside him. This wasn't over. He would escape. He would find a way to rebuild. But then, a whisper crackled through his communicator. "You're not getting out of here." Vraksha froze. His blood turned to ice. He slowly turned his head, scanning the shadows, his yellow reptilian eyes wide with fear. Nothing. Just darkness. Another whisper. "I'm watching you." Vraksha's heart pounded. He reached for his plasma pistol, claws slick with sweat. "Show yourself, coward," he snarled, his voice shaking. "Face me in battle." Silence. Then, crack. A bullet tore through the air, barely missing him, slamming into the metal wall beside his head. The impact sent a shower of sparks into the corridor, and Vraksha flinched, eyes wide in terror. That hadn't been a miss. That had been a warning. A message. The sniper, the ghost of this battlefield, was here. Hunting him. The hunter in the dark. Vraksha scrambled forward, activating his cloak generator. His body flickered, vanishing into the shadows. He kept moving, his clawed feet barely making a sound as he slipped through the debris-strewn corridors. His heart thundered in his chest. The cloak would save him. It had always saved him. No one could track him now. No one could see him. Then, a whisper. "You think I can't see you?" Vraksha's breath caught in his throat. How? It wasn't possible. The humans didn't have this technology. Another whisper. "You can hide from your own men, Warlord. But not from me." Vraksha spun, his pistol raised. The shadows were empty. Nothing. Just darkness. Then, crack. Pain exploded in his knee. Vraksha screamed, collapsing onto the cold steel floor. Blood poured from the fresh wound, staining the ground beneath him. His cloak flickered and failed. He was visible again. Vraksha dragged himself behind a broken console, panting, his mind racing in terror. The human had let him cloak. Had waited for him to run. And then, with a single shot, had crippled him. This wasn't a battle. This was execution. The final bullet. Vraksha crawled, his breath ragged, his hands slick with his own blood. He forced himself against the ruined wall, his claws trembling as he raised his plasma pistol. The chamber was silent. His eyes darted across the room. Nothing. No movement. Only the shadows. And then, a whisper. "You laughed at us." Vraksha's grip tightened on his pistol. His claws shook. "You mocked our weapons." The voice was closer now. Vraksha snapped his pistol up, firing blindly into the darkness. Plasma bolts sizzled through the air, scorching metal and burning through debris. Nothing. Just empty air. Then, a single word. "Good night." Crack. The bullet punched through his skull. His head jerked back, his body twitched once, and then, silence. High Commander Vraksha, last warlord of the Zorvith Dominion, slumped forward. Dead. The end of an empire. Cole Reynolds lowered his rifle. The mission was complete. Velzora had fallen. The Dominion's leadership was annihilated. Their once mighty forces were now nothing more than corpses littering the battlefield. And the last warlord, the one who had laughed at humanity, now lay dead in the dust. Reynolds exhaled slowly, his heart rate steady. From the ruined balcony, he looked out at the city, watching as the last human strike teams secured the remaining enemy positions. The Zorvith had been erased. Somewhere, across the galaxy, alien empires were watching this battle. And they were terrified. Because now, they knew the truth. Humanity was not weak. Humanity was not prey. And if anyone ever dared to challenge Earth again, they would end up just like the Zorvith. Dead. Epilogue, The Whisper of War. On a distant world, in a shadowed war chamber, an alien council watched the footage. They saw the ruins of Velzora. They saw the burning bodies of the Zorvith elite. And they saw the sniper. One man. One rifle. The single human who had destroyed an empire. The alien warlords looked at one another, uneasy. One of them, a massive insectoid general, leaned forward. "Humans," he whispered. A pause. Then, in a voice filled with dread. "Are the greatest killers in the galaxy." The War Council sat in silence. For the first time, they felt something they had never felt before. Fear.